This is me and this is my teammate Dean Powell, and I'm going to show you how I can compare both of our telemetry data at Donington Circuit to figure out how he can improve and close the gap. He's got some new pedals and he also hasn't spent as much time in the Mustang GT3, so there should be plenty of pointers to find. I'm going to be doing that using VRS's online telemetry tool. Me and Dean have been subscribers of VRS for a few years now for telemetry and car setups most of the time, and it's been really valuable for situations like this. Check the description for more info and how to sign up, but what follows is my entire analysis session, so you can see me find the causes and talk it through. And although VRS is on display here and it's my preferred tool for this, there are numerous popular options you can choose to do this nowadays, such as Motec, Garage 61. The overall moral of this video is to give telemetry a chance. Take the time to analyze yours. It can highlight the behavior that's slowing you down, so you can immediately apply corrections and make you instantly faster. Furthermore, it's worth noting that my teammate could also have taken a look at the same data anytime he liked. VRS is a great self-help tool, but he didn't. Lazy. Okay, so I'm going to compare my best lap in this particular session with Dean's best lap in this particular session. So I've got this one here, the purple lap at 126.25. So I'm going to select that as a compare target, and here is where I basically select the laps to compare. So I've got me on this side and me on this side as well, so I'm going to change that to teammates because Dean is already on my team, and then I'm going to select his optimal lap. I'm selecting optimal lap because I want to basically get his best sectors versus my best sectors. It's the best way to compare and really find out where we truly are different in our approaches. So my optimal lap is a 125.9. That'd be nice. His optimal lap is a 126.7. And the reason why there's a disparity there is because I've probably spent a good few more laps in the Mustang GT3 than Dean has. He's coming into it later than I am, so it's not a surprise that there's a fairly chunky gap, and I'm basically using telemetry here to help him get up to speed as quickly as possible and find out where he's differing in his driving style compared to me, so that he can adjust it quickly and find that time with much less trial and error. So here we go. I've got me on the left hand side, Dean on the right hand side. Optimal lap 125.9, optimal lap 126.7. And you can see here the properties of the laps, and they're pretty much the same. I'm carrying a few less litres of fuel than Dean is, but the track is pretty much the same temperature. There's very minor and minuscule differences between the two because we were on track at the same time essentially, and we were both doing quali runs at the time as well. So the laps should be equal. If one of us had a full tank of fuel, then it wouldn't be fair, but you can still learn a lot from 2 laps, even if there's a disparity in fuel and temperature. They can still teach you something. So here we go then. So over the whole lap, there is a 0.7 second difference, a 7/10 difference to be made. But I'm looking at the sector times. You can see all the sector times listed up the top of the screen here, split into its individual components. So it's not full sectors, but it's in straight zero. So the start finish straight, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5 and 6, and so on. And the differences are really small. There's no standout sector or turn where I'm absolutely smashing him. We're actually really level pegged. It's just it's kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts lap time here. So we're going to need to look at pretty much all of the turns and try and identify some difference between my approach and his approach, and then identify what it is and let him know in a nice, easy, digestible biscuit of information. So we'll start at turn 1. This is the only turn whereby actually Dean has the advantage. He is 200ths of a second quicker than me. He can do turn 1 200ths of a second quicker than me. But I'm looking now to the right hand side of the screen. This is where all your driver inputs can be found, and I'm looking for any differences in the general approach, and I'm seeing one thing already that is quite different between us. He is braking slightly later. No, he isn't actually. That's wrong. I was looking at his throttle trace. So I'm looking now, if I just play this, I can play it so you can see the inputs down at the bottom left hand corner. I'm onto the throttle or gas much earlier, but Dean is braking earlier than me as well. But I think that he's got a bit of input overlap here. He has just got a new set of brake pedals, literally a new set of brake pedals that he only installed that day. So this also helps me figure out whether or not there's something he might need to adjust or be more aware of that might not be apparent when you're focusing on your driving. So immediately I can see that there's a big overlap between his throttle and brake. He's got, and I do overlap as well, but he's got much more of an overlap here than I do. So he might need to clamp down on that because he's nearly at half brake while he's on full throttle. So I'll point that out to him in the notes that I'm gonna pass over. So I'm gonna pop up a little notepad here that basically lists my main observations. Throttle and brake overlap is high. And later on I'm going to send some screenshots to basically illustrate what I mean by that. But throttle and brake overlap is high, so he probably needs to adjust the preload on his brake or be more aware of it, because his old pedal set probably had quite a bit of initial dead zone before any brake was registered, so you might need to adjust it. But anyway, turn one, there's very little difference between us. I'm not going to spend any more time on this one because there's nothing that we can really teach him or teach each other. There's nothing he can learn from me, nothing I can learn from him there. Turn two and turn three, there's nothing to them. They're just going down the hill. But I can see one thing. I mean, it's a hundredth of a second between us, but you know, time is time. I am chopping that corner tighter than he is. You can see the difference between the blue line, which is me, and the red dotted line, which is Dean. So if I play that and then catch it in the middle of the stream, you can see that we are chopping that downhill left. This is the left-hand corner at the bottom of Donington, downhill, and I'm almost a metre further to the left than he is. Something to bear in mind, because turn 3 does feed in to turn 4, which is almost half a tenth difference between us there, so we'll find out what's going on there. Turn 4, this is where we start to get into the little pieces that all add up to a tenth here and there. I can see that by the looks of it, he is braking much earlier than me, and there's a massive overlap in his inputs, which is probably making the car feel like it just won't turn in. So once again, before he's even off the throttle, he's at 35% brake. So yeah, he'll definitely need to clamp down on that. I think if he adds a bit of preload to his brake pedal to avoid this, because I can't imagine there's much that's changed about his driving style, you know, just by adding a new set of pedals. But if he adjusts that or is aware that it's happening, then he can change it and clamp down on it. But as we head into turn 4, the speed difference is quite stark here. Dean is actually carrying 10 kilometers an hour more speed here. You can tell, but if you look at the driver inputs at the top, you can see how his dotted red line remains higher than mine for quite a way. So at this moment in time here, Dean is actually ahead of me. He's going faster than I am at this point in time. His brake trace, he's trail braking quite long. So what I think is happening is he's probably just lunging the car in a bit too deep. Maybe he needs to brake a little bit harder in the earlier stage. Because what's happening is that he's not utilizing his brake as much as he maybe could be when the car is still going straight, because we're only using a little bit of steering at this point in time, and there's a big difference between the amount of braking that we're putting on here. So that means I'm killing the speed as necessary faster than he is to set me up for the rest of the corner. And he did say to me that he was finding the Mustang was somewhat hard to turn in at times, particularly in slow corners, but that might be contributing to it. The fact that he's kind of leaning on the brake more when he's actually turning in. So when we turn the wheel in, at the point of turning the wheel in, he's actually on the brakes slightly more than I am. And that might be all it takes to make the Mustang, or any car really, that might be all it takes to make the car want to push on instead of turning the corner. And as we progress through the corner, before I'm even hitting the apex, I'm able to get back on the throttle quicker. And I think this is the big difference between us. This is what happens when you go in too fast and too heavy. It robs you of a chance to get your power back onto the corner early and get a better exit. So I can see that I'm also chopping the corner much more than he is. I am at the apex. I am more than a meter over to the right than he is. So he probably can chop that curb more, and that is a corner where chopping that curb as much as you can get away with really, really helps. So I'm getting on the throttle much earlier than he is, and I'm chopping the corner more than he is. I'm pushing the track limits more than he is. So maybe I want to add a bit of a note here. General driving style, softer entry, faster exit. Softer entry, earlier throttle, faster exit. That's what I'm observing here, at least. That's what it tells me, because he's maintaining a higher speed in the entry to the corner. He's maintaining a higher speed, but it's losing him time on the exit. So all of the time I gain on Dean is basically gained at the apex and afterwards. And turn 4 leads into the uphill stretch of turn 5 and 6. So let's move on to that now. Yeah, you can see there's almost a tenth in it. So it's basically a 3/10, and it's all gained by setting up a good exit to turn 4. There's a 7. If you draw your eyes up here, there's a big difference between my blue line and Dean's dotted red line. That's just the speed of the car. So I've got a 7-kilometer edge on Dean at the start of the run up the hill to turn 5 and 6. And that's all because turn 4 was laid up carefully by just being a bit gentler before the corner apex and lining up a really good exit. So there's a speed advantage that I get basically for free, because there's no skill in this section really. It's all just placement. Dean's placement is basically the same as mine. He probably actually has a more direct and more efficient route to the corner, so maybe I've got something to learn from here there. We'll see, because we're now coming up to turn 7, which is where the biggest disparity is between us, over a tenth in this corner alone. So let's see what might be happening. From looking at the graph, once again, Dean is going into the first half of the corner faster, but coming out slower. And I think that's where the gap is. That's where the time difference is. He's going in heavy and coming out slow. That's probably something you can say about an all-you-can-eat buffet. So throttle, he's actually extending his throttle further into the corner than I am. But he brakes at the same point. So I think that pedal overlap is also really upsetting the car's balance. So he comes off the throttle way later than I do, but he brakes at the same point. So if I move this on frame by frame, in the setup to the corner, he's on the brake halfway, but he's still on the throttle halfway. And I know he's in the process of lifting his foot off the throttle, but this big overlap is something that could be upsetting his car. I do overlap, definitely. In fact, I'm probably just as bad as he is, really. It's probably where he gets it from. But you can see clearly that there is a longer and more severe overlap on his part than there is in mine. I definitely do overlap my inputs slightly, but he's doing it to a large degree here. It's almost like he's preloading the brake. He's preloading the brake with his left foot before he's even coming off the throttle. So it's a behavioural thing that might be causing the Mustang to lose its ability to turn in a little bit, just a tiny bit, just enough to make him feel like the car wants to understeer a bit. I'm also keeping a wider line on initial entry. A wider line on initial entry, only a metre to the left. I am a metre to the left of where Dean would be on his optimal lap. But that does tell me that he needs to generally take a wider line into T7. I'm just wondering whether the same thing applies to turn 4 as well. A little bit, not quite so much. But turn 7 is where the biggest difference in time is, and he is basically he's making the entry to the corner too narrow. So entry to corner too narrow, turn 7. And because of that, he's also not able to get onto the throttle as early as I am either. Because if he's made the entry quite narrow and shallow, so to speak, then he won't be able to get onto the throttle as early as I can. Because he's going to be worried at this point in the corner, at the exit, he's just going to be worried about trying to keep it on the track. So his narrower entry is costing him on exit. And that is where all the speed difference is between us. So he actually edges out ahead until the corner apex, and then he loses out massively after that. So that's what the ingredients are of that over a tenth gap between us. His brake trace is very similar to mine, so he's doing that part right. He's just getting on it too early and overlapping his inputs and positioning his car too narrow and shallow into the corner. So those two things, one of them is environmental, his throttle and brake overlap is too high. Once he sorts that out, then the rest should fall into place with a few little pointers on specific corners. Turn 8, this is the blind right-hander at the top of the hill. And the little sort of quirk in the line there is due to the fact that we are comparing optimal sectors, so some of the sectors won't line up or join up. But nonetheless, it seems characteristic that Dean is getting he's getting a slower exit speed from turn 7, which is basically bleeding in to the turn 8 section. So that bad exit from turn 7 is costing him initially, because other than that, our speed traces, the actual speed that we're going, is really similar after that. We're also getting onto the throttle at basically exactly the same point. I'm only marginally more aggressive, but 10-20% differences in throttle input is really easy and simple to kind of just do accidentally, so I must have just got lucky. But the way he's applying his throttle is the same as me, so he's going up to the halfway step and then bleeding it in after that. That's fair enough. There's only 0.03 of a second difference in it as well, so there's really nothing to learn there. Turn 9 and 10. There's half a tenth in it, nearly. This is the chicane, as the Donington track joins the final sector. So chicane into 2 slow hairpins as we round out the end of a lap. And this is where Dean said to me, personally, he felt he was struggling the most with the Mustang. Not with the chicane, but with the slow hairpins. So I'm looking forward to seeing what might be the cause behind that. But here we go. Turn 9 and 10 hairpin. Turn 9 and 10 chicane. And if I play it through, the biggest difference I can see here is that I am on the throttle much earlier. So I'll try and figure out what makes that possible. What am I doing that's making that possible? Much like many of the corners, Dean is actually carrying more speed in. He's carrying more speed in. Some of that will be due to the delay in his car actually slowing down, and it's all because of those pedal overlaps. So he's applying the brakes basically at the same point that I am. But because of this, maybe looks like about 10 meters, 10-15 meters, whereby he's still on full throttle whilst he's getting onto the brake. That's what's causing that disparity and probably unsettling the car in general. So I definitely need to emphasize that the biggest thing that seems to be harming him right now is a miscalibration of pedals that's making it too easy for him to be putting brake on while he's trying to feed off the throttle and onto the brake. My throttle application is much earlier. It's basically it's basically just after I've turned in, and this is a really fun chicane. It's one of the reasons I love this chicane, because it feels really quick, and when you get the timing of your throttle application right, it just feels so quick. He's also taken a shallower and kind of I think he's turning in too early and too soft. Yeah, too early and too softly, although our steering angle doesn't really look very different here. You can see the differences in how much we're turning our wheel. Doesn't really make much sense, does it? The fact that I've got more steering angle on, and yet Dean is the one that's turning into the corner more sharply. That's clearly due to the fact that my car is basically on the feathered edge. Very weird. If there was a yaw angle input here, I'm sure there is, but if there was, then it might show a big difference. I'll look into that later. So from here, I would say he needs to maybe brake a little bit earlier. Definitely get rid of that throttle overlap. Brake a little bit earlier and just set up his exit better so that he can get onto the throttle earlier. He's getting onto the throttle basically 25 meters after me. He's getting on the throttle basically when he's about to touch the apex. I'm getting back onto the power much earlier because I can tell that the car is pointed in. So this might be a case of, again, enter the corner softer so that you can get a better and faster exit, because it seems to feed in so much to the next sectors that follow it. Other than that, he's really not doing a lot wrong. So a later turn-in, in my opinion, and chop the curbs a little bit more, I think he can get away with it a little bit more. So on the first apex, he's a quarter of a meter further off the curb than I am. That's nothing. But on the second apex, he is nearly half a meter. So I just need to basically say, experiment chopping the chicane curbs a little bit more. This is his optimal sector, by the way. This isn't a race sector where he's playing it safe. This is his optimal sector where he's going the fastest he has gone throughout the whole session. So really speaking, he needs to try being a bit more daring. Obviously, the more daring he gets at this particular point of the track, the more likely he is to incur a slowdown. So we don't want to encourage him to get a slowdown penalty. But that is where the time is. On that particular chicane, that is probably where the time is. But there's only half a tenth in it, so really small margins. But straight 10. So this is the straight between the chicane and the first hairpin, and I get half a tenth basically free of charge just because of the chicane being set up better. So although there's only half a tenth in the chicane itself, the benefit is gained afterwards. Look at the speed difference. There's just 4 kilometers, 3 kilometers. As the speed goes up, the margin reduces, but there's all of that free speed just because the chicane was built, was set up better. Right, the hairpin then. So there's a tenth difference between us, and a big deviation in the way we do our lines here. Really big deviation in the way we do our racing lines. I can see that from here. Don't even have to zoom in to see that. We're releasing the throttle at basically the same point. Identical throttle release, but he is still on the brake earlier. There's too much overlap there. So if he solves that problem, then a lot of the corners will suddenly become better and easier for him. So he's not going any deeper or faster into it than I am, really. There's a minor difference between us, almost certainly caused by that throttle overlap. So once he gets that sorted, he'll be fine. But this is where the real difference is. Uh, I'm turning in harder, but Dean is that's very confusing. That'll be why. Um, the reason that's happening is essentially because I'm braking more. So I think that I'm trail braking. I'm nearly at 100% brake there as well.
Now I'm just going to interrupt myself here. I'm watching this during editing and it seems so obvious to me now what's happening, but I was a bit flummoxed at the time. I was so close to figuring it out. What's happening here is that I am getting understeer because I'm overusing the brake. So yes, I might have a more aggressive steering angle on, but because I'm overusing the brake, I'm nearly at 100%, I'm actually the one that needs to modify my behaviour here. If this is something that I'm doing all the time, then I'm losing time because of it. Dean's actually getting the better turning because he's using less brake, he isn't pushing the brakes to the limit, and therefore he has less understeer in the first sector of the corner than I do.
Well, let's uncomplicate things. I need to just look at the racing line. The racing line tells me that he is basically turning in slightly too early and making it a early apex when he needs to be making it a late apex. If you look at his red dotted line, he gets closest to the hairpin in this part of the hairpin corner. So he's actually clipping the apex too early and it's spoiling his exit. This is his optimal sector. This is the fastest he ever did it. So this must clearly be just the line he takes. So he's clipping the apex too early, whereas I'm rounding it out a lot more and I'm clipping the apex on the exit instead. So he needs to basically make it a late apex. He needs to resist the urge to turn in and chop that early. He needs to resist turning, make it a late apex. And the payoff of a late apex is that I can get on the throttle earlier than he can. This is where I get back on the power. So at this point in the corner, I'm at half power. And the reason I'm at half power is because it allows the back end to push the car around and aid in rotation without cutting in the traction control too much. So half power is a good... Half power basically feels like you're sort of pushing a toy car around with one finger. It gives that car more of a rotational push whilst also changing you from braking to accelerating. So it's a really handy thing to do in the middle of slow corners. If you just feed in a bit of throttle, it'll really help with general rotation and sector time. But I'll go into that in another video. So Dean's early apex is spoiling his exit. The angle of my car is pointed way more towards the exit to give me a clear run out, whereas his is basically still pointed over here, and there's nothing but grass and a tyre wall there, so he has to delay his throttle application to about 10 meters. There's about 10 meters in it. But my line is also much shorter. My line to the exit is shorter. And although Dean is putting throttle on, who's to say that traction control isn't cutting in like mad for him there either? So that's going to be where the difference is. The speed trace is really slim between us, but there is still a difference. So I think that there's an element of my line is just shorter in length, so he needs to take a late apex to that hairpin. And I think that the same will be true of the hairpin that follows as well. Straight 11. Once again, I think my exit just sets me up much better than his does. From that first hairpin, gives me a 2 kilometer speed advantage on him all the way through this little stretch of land here, basically free of charge. And then finally, the final hairpin. Where is this going wrong for him? Because he said to me, I find the Mustang pretty difficult to kind of exit from the hairpins from. He felt like it was really slow on the hairpin exits. So let's have a look at this. Pedal overlap also coming into play once again. So we're braking at the same time. We're starting to brake at the same time. he's ramping his brake up, but he's on the throttle for much longer. So that pedal overlap is really robbing him of time. Dean is a quick guy. He's almost always keeping me honest. Like he's qualifying so close to me now that there's something like this will be what's leaking speed from him. So once he realizes that this is happening, because he's probably not watched his replays back, but once he realizes that is happening, he will understand where the time is going. Unlike the previous hairpin, I'm actually the one that's entering the hairpin at a shallower angle, and I think it's got something to do with the camber of this particular hairpin. It's got a weird camber, which basically means that the tighter you are into the apex, the better your turn. So you don't really want to take like a late apex kind of point of view for this one, in my opinion. It's never really worked for me. This is one of those corners where it is literally just a case of take the shortest possible line and get yourself out of it as quickly as possible. So if I go frame by frame, my initial brake application is much more direct. But again, Dean's throttle overlap is kind of spoiling it for him. But once we get in to the hairpin, you can kind of tell he's struggling with understeer, because his steering angle is much more pronounced than mine, and that might actually be what's spoiling it for him as well. He needs to basically calm down a bit on the steering for that. That overuse of the steering wheel might be what's causing him to pick up some initial understeer. In the middle of the corner, we actually do steer the same amount. This is the phase of the corner where all of the waviness from the initial trail braking is gone. We've now clipped the apex, and now we're just waiting to pick the throttle point. And I'm getting onto the throttle ever so slightly quicker than he is. And there's some of my input overlap. I'm getting onto the throttle a little bit sooner than he is. And there's only a couple of kilometers difference in speed between us, which is nothing, but it is what contributes to the time. That time has to be gained somewhere. The biggest speed difference between us is in this part of the corner, whereby I think that he is steering slightly too much, and that's slightly too much for the car in that particular moment, and it's causing him to probably understeer. It's causing the front end to push. So for the last hairpin, I would say take a tighter line but steer less. Take a tighter line. Don't make such a big corner out of it, because the camber is all weird on that corner. If you've done Donington GP layout, you know why. It's a horrible little corner. But in my experience, I've found just throwing yourself at the apex, getting it turned, and then picking the throttle point to get out of it is better than trying to make a big smooth corner out of it. It's just not the sort of corner where that really pays off. And then the run to the start and finish line, there's a 1.5 kilometers speed advantage for me. And there you go. So that's the whole lap. Turn by turn, straight by straight, sector by sector. Over the whole lap, it's 7/10 off. But over each individual section, we're talking half a tenth here, half a tenth there. But when you add them all together, they all add up. So I'm now going to finish my notes off. Last corner, more of a V-shaped line. Last corner, more of a V-shaped line. Just hug the apex. They are the pointers that I would say are going to contribute to him. If he applies all of this, then I'm pretty confident that he will gain a couple of tenths at least. At least. He's normally only a tenth or two off. So a big difference like that, besides the fact that I've done loads more laps in the Mustang than he has, a gap like that is also going to be something environmental that he's doing slightly wrong. So I think he's generally driving into the corners too hard, and he's having to pick up the throttle later as a result. So I would say softer entry, earlier throttle will give you a faster exit, which is what you want to prioritize. So let's take it to Discord. So throttle and brake overlap is high. So the first thing I'm going to do is try and find an example of where his throttle and brake overlap is basically highest. So that seems like a good one. The entry to turn 4. So his throttle and brake overlap is really high. So I'm going to take a quick screen clipping of that and post it in the Discord and just say throttle and brake overlap seems to be a problem for you, so recalibrate your pedals with a bit more preload / dead zone. Lots of corners where your brake pedal is being pressed long before you come off throttle. So that's a big problem. That's priority number 1. Basically, you have a look at his throttle overlap. Interesting, right? Yeah, he's obviously online and looking. So general driving style, softer entry, earlier throttle, faster exit. So I need to find a corner whereby this is really pronounced. Yeah, this will do. So turn 7. That was it. Nah, turn 7 was the one where his line was too wide. Turn 4 was definitely the best one for this. So I'm going to take a screen grab of the entire screen. I'm going to open it in Image Editor. I'm going to put an arrow next to the red dotted line, and I'm going to put that as a red arrow, and then I'm going to put a green arrow next to my throttle point. Take a picture, post it into the Discord, and just say your entry speed to corners is usually higher than mine, but your throttle is coming on way later usually, and you're slower out of corners as a result. So this says to me that you're going in a bit too hot generally. Try to be gentler into corners so you can prioritize corner exit. Your entry speed is usually higher than mine. Well, I'm going to edit that so that he knows what I'm talking about. So entry speed, he'll figure it out anyway, but it just saves time. Your entry speed to corners, red arrow, is usually higher than mine, but your throttle is coming on way later. Green arrow shows my throttle point. And entry to corner too narrow, turn 7. So we want to go to turn 7 and that's it. So turn 7. Take a little screen grab of that and put it into there. Widen your entry to turn 7. That's the corner that follows the run up the hill after the bridge. And is the corner just before the blind right. I'm sure there's a more efficient way to flipping describe which corner I'm talking about, but that's the description I'm going for. Widen your entry to turn 7. That's the right hand corner that follows the run up the hill. That'll let you apex a little later. That'll let you get on throttle earlier. What else? Experiment chopping the chicane curbs a little bit more. Yeah, so chicane curbs a little bit more. And I'm also going to include that throttle point so that you can see I'm basically coming on the throttle almost instantaneously after I've set the car up for turning. So that's when I'm coming off the brake, and this is where I have my own little overlaps. But I'm straight back on it. I'm straight back on the throttle to stabilize the car and steady it a bit. So for the chicane, okay, so I'm gonna do a little screen grab and say this is where I'm getting onto the throttle for the chicane. The green arrow shows where I start reapplying throttle. And the red arrow shows where he does. So typically his behavior for the chicane is to lead in for longer. He needs to be more proactively getting back on the throttle, because that will also help stabilize the car and give him more confidence, which he can then use to chop the chicane more confidently. Red. Oh. Red. And so try getting onto your throttle earlier for the chicane. It'll be more stable and should help with rotation at the same time. So what was my final point? Yeah, here we go. Turn 11. This was a hairpin at the bottom of the hill. He needs to late apex it. So I forgot to write that note down. Turn 11, first hairpin. Need to make a later apex. delay turning. This one's kind of self-explanatory. As soon as he sees that line, he's going to figure out what the problem is. But that shows the line difference between us. So he is chopping. I'm going to put an arrow next to this as well. So red is where he apexes, or maybe that there, yeah. And green is where I apex. Red. So for the first hairpin, you're apexing too early and it's restricting the exit. Red arrow shows where you clip the hairpin. Yeah, that should help him out. And what he'll then do is basically he'll more consciously try to avoid clipping the hairpin too early. He will definitely apply it. And finally, for the final hairpin, it's basically the other way around. For the final hairpin, he's actually turning in too late. He's turning in too late and he's turning the wheel more than he needs to, which is really odd. It's an odd combination. So I'll include that and just say it looks like you might be turning too much for the scenario, because at this particular point in the corner, the track actually falls away from you. The elevation falls away. So it might be that this is too much steering to do the job, and he needs to reduce his steering. So I would say point his car towards the apex earlier by using less steering, which makes zero sense, but that's just the way it is. That's the way it is with sim racing. So a red arrow to the steering, a red arrow to the line, and anything else. What else could I possibly do? No, they're the things that really matter for that hairpin corner. So I think that he is best placed to make it a more narrow V-shaped corner. Final hairpin, try to point your car towards the apex a little sooner as the elevation change, where the track falls away from you, seems to be causing your car to struggle to turn, which is basically what he said to me. He said, does this car feel like it just can't get out of these, can't get around these slow hairpins as quickly? And I never found a problem, and this is one of the reasons why. Basically get the turning done before get the bulk of the turning done. So basically get the bulk of the turning done before the road crests and falls away. Make your line for the corner more of a V shape where you hug the apex. Making a wide entry to this corner doesn't work as well due to that elevation change and crest on the way in. And you've seen it, you absolute legend, watch me win. That'd be great. That'd be a brilliant testimonial. There you go. So he's read it and he's going to apply it now, and we'll see if he does any better. Okay, so now is a moment of truth. It's now the next day, so I'm going to compare Dean's previous laps with the lap that he did after the analysis. So these are all Dean's laps or sessions that he's done, because I can just pick him from the teammates list. I'll go into this one, Mustang Donington. I can see he did, the last session was 16 hours ago, so that was last night. And the session before that was 2 days ago. That was the practice session that we did that provided the baseline for the analysis that I've just done. But anyway, so Dean's session from 2 days ago, that's the session that we just analysed. In that session, his optimal time was a 1:26.7, and in his new one, his optimal time was a 1:26.4. So there's 3 tenths for these chopped off, and we can analyse it and see where. So this will highlight where his line or just general inputs differs from the previous day and the following day. So that's all we want from the 18th of December. Optimal lap 26.7 and optimal lap 26.4. So there are a few minor differences between the two sessions, but nothing that would generate that big a difference. So his pre-analysis lap was done with slightly more fuel and a slightly higher track temperature, maybe like half a degree more to a degree at most. So the conditions are still really similar. They're very, very similar. They are comparable, I would say. But the proof will be in the pudding with his inputs. So let's see. Let's see where he's made the difference. Let's have a look. So his full... Oh, it's gone the other way around. I need to swap these. Yeah, swap the laps. This makes it easier to see where he's actually made up the time, because now the positive effects are blue. So turn 1. So Dean's previous lap, the pre-analysis lap, is in the red dotted line. And the post-analysis lap, his most recent lap, is in the blue line. So basically we're looking to see if his blue line is better. And turn 1, unfortunately, he's down a tenth on turn 1. So whatever he's doing there is costing him time, not gaining it. So he still has a whole bunch of pedal overlap, but it ain't as bad as it was. So his pedal overlap now is much less severe, but he is nonetheless still doing it to a slight degree. But it's probably comparable to mine. So I'm not gonna be too hard on him for that. And this lap was likely done in qualifying, and you don't get unlimited chances to do a quali lap. So we'll move on from it. But turn 7, this is the one where he's made the biggest difference. He is nearly 2.5 tenths up on his previous optimal, and it's turn 7 that most of it is being done. So let's have a look and analyse. So he is definitely widening the entry to turn 7. That's one of the things that I said he would need to do. He is nearly a whole metre over to the left. It's just a behavioural thing. Opening the corner when you enter it means that you can get onto the throttle earlier, and he is doing that. He's onto the throttle much earlier, a good 10 metres earlier, and it's gaining him tons and tons of speed on the exit. So that's a great improvement. Turn 7 is now much quicker just because he's modified his entry. So brilliant. Turn 9 and 10, chicane. Are there any real differences in what he's doing, or did he just happen to nail it a bit better? His line is pretty much identical, so he's not chopping the chicane anymore. And thinking back to it, I don't think I really actually specified to chop the chicane more, so he can't apply something I didn't tell him. So that was my mistake for missing that out. But he is. There's still some overlap there, so he still needs to work on that and try and minimize that a bit. But he is more confident on the throttle. He isn't applying the throttle any earlier, but he's just more confident in applying it fully. And that's where the speed difference is. He is 5 kilometers an hour faster than his previous self, but everything else kind of looks the same. Turn 11, this was where I said he needed to make it a bit tighter and try an apex later. He is definitely doing that. So you can see his line there. He's taken a wider entry into it. It's only a metre difference, maybe a little bit less than, but he is consciously trying to resist turning in too early, and he's apexing later as a result, or he's able to tighten the exit, which is perfect. It's a more direct line. It's just quicker through that corner. That's nearly a tenth gained in that one corner. and it's a behavioural modification as well. He's actually changed his behaviour, his turning points, and how he does it. And the line is clearly different as a result of that. Last corner. He's trying to apply it. I think on this occasion it's probably just the fact that he might have whiffed the apex a little bit and not quite hugged it as much as he wanted to. So maybe with more laps, more attempts, he would nail this particular sector. But in this particular lap, he's only just quicker. But he is trying. He's narrowing his entry to that corner. So he's basically a metre more to the left than he normally would be on his previous optimal. He's taking a more direct route to the apex and straightening up his entry to the corner so that he isn't as badly affected by the elevation change and the road falling away from him. But as a result, he slightly misses that apex and has to kind of temper it on the exit. So maybe if he had a few more qualifying runs, as he did in the previous day's practice, where he set this red dotted line lap, he would have had about 4 or 5 quali practice runs, whereas this blue line is from the race session, and I don't know how many times he would have had a chance to do some quali runs on quali fuel. But nonetheless, doesn't matter if he did, he's still over 2 tenths improved on his previous optimal lap. And this is an optimal lap that we're analysing here. This is his absolute best showing in each turn and sector. So he's done a good job. He's gained 2 tenths just by modifying his behaviour and doing the things that I've pointed out to do. And with more practice and more runs on this particular track combo, he would probably have been able to push that envelope even more. But it's now behind us. The race is done. He did better than he would have done had he not had the analysis sent over. I'm sure of that. Good on him for applying what he has been told and taking action. So in a nutshell, with the same car and track combo, he's gained 2 tenths on his previous optimal. So great job, Dean.
So there we are, that's how I would rummage through the telemetry between me and my teammate to spot any improvements that could be made. Normally it wouldn't take this long, but the commentary drags it out. It's usually a quick 15-minute dip in, dip out. But you can do this too. You don't have to be a pro to coach someone else. I'm not a professional esports level driver. All you have to do to coach someone is to be able to elevate them above their current level. That's it. If you like the look of VRS, then information is in the description. I'm not planning to start doing coaching yet, but if one day that changes, then you'll find info on that there too. In the meantime, you could enlist the aid of one of VRS's top level coaches, or try out their Team VRS group, which gives you access to multiple group coaching sessions for an additional £10 a month. Hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments whatsoever, fire away in the comments below, and cheers again for watching.